Good evening, everyone. Today we are having a daily debate on 17th July. The topic for our debate is: should tech companies be held accountable for human rights violation in their supply chains? In the proposition, we have Pranath, and in the opposition, we'll have Preksha. We'll start with the proposition. Pranath, you have 3 minutes on your clock.
Yeah, actually, I'll start on my self count. Would that be okay, right? Hello? Yeah, I'll start on my self count of three, two, one. Ma'am, there is a clear and urgent question here. If a company benefits from abuse, should it not also be should it not also bear responsibility for it? The answer is yes, and this is not an emotional statement, it's a legal and moral one. Ma'am, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Businesses and Human Rights, adopted in 2011, clearly states that corporations have a responsibility to respect human rights across their entire supply chain. That includes suppliers, that include contractors, and no exceptions. Ma'am, involvement here includes supply chains, and that is where the real problem lies. Because today, some of the biggest tech companies in the world continue to profit while at the base of the supply chains are trapped in unsafe and exploitative conditions. A 2016 report by the Amnesty International exposed that children as young as 7 were mining cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is then used in batteries of smartphones, laptops, and electric cars. No health protection, no education, no accountability. Ma'am, despite global attention, these companies continue to source from the same regions. The only thing that changed was the language on their websites. That's the blunder we are addressing here. Not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of choice. They knew and then still continued. Another case, the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, where over 1100 garment workers died in 2013. The building was cracked, warnings were issued, but because of supply chains but because of suppliers were under pressure from the multinational brands to meet deadlines, the workers were forced back inside and it collapsed and they died. And even then, many brands refused to pay compensations, stating that they had no direct control over the factory. Ma'am, if that's not the problem with the current system, then what is? Ma'am, the problem here isn't that companies don't know what's happening. It is that they've learned to how to look away. Because when profit becomes the only priority, ethics become optional. And what we see today is not a lack of awareness, but a lack of accountability. These companies have teams of lawyers, PR consultants, and data analysts, but somehow they don't have the capacity to ensure that the people mining, assembling, or packaging the products are not being abused. That is not that they can't act. It's that they choose not to. Ma'am, when companies at the top keep making billions while the people at the bottom suffer and no one is held responsible, then something is clearly wrong with the system itself. Because if profit keeps moving upward but responsibility keeps getting pushed downward, then the entire idea of a fair supply chain falls apart. What we are really looking at isn't a supply chain, it's a shield that lets companies look clean on paper, while the real damage is hidden far away from the headlines. And that is exactly why this can't be ignored anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranath, for your opening statement. Preksha, if you can just wait for 1 second, I'll be back. Just a minute. There's some problem here. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Preksha, whenever you're ready. Preksha?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the count of three, two, one. We oppose holding tech companies legally accountable for human rights violation in their supply chain, as it can impose very unrealistic burdens, and it can also distract them from their actual systematic and governmental responsibility. I would like to present the following arguments. First, they have a lack of direct control because tech companies often rely on global supply chains, which are very complex and can involve a lot of contractors, subcontractors, and third-party suppliers. That is why they cannot have direct control or visibility over the operations of the day-to-day operations of these entities. Also, moreover, expecting these tech firms to check and police every single level of their supply chain is very unrealistic and burdensome, especially for the smaller firms. Moreover, compliance could require disproportionate resources and frameworks which are not yet globally standard. Um, Holding companies accountable for human rights abuses in other countries can infringe on the national sovereignty and their legal jurisdiction. It is very inappropriate for a company headquartered in one country to be held liable for violations occurring under another government laws. And strict accountability measures could maybe distort the market, and it can place responsible companies at a very at a competitive disadvantage as compared to the competitors who are overseas, or maybe are less regulated, who can actually cut costs and ignore such problems and concerns. And expecting private companies to act as global human rights enforces and diverts responsibility from where it actually belongs, which is national governments and international bodies. And overregulation or strict accountability may lead companies to exit high risk regions entirely, which can apparently lead to job loss, or worse conditions for vulnerable workers rather than improving their solution. So, cutting ties with a supplier in developing country might remove one of the own very few economic opportunities which are actually available to the local workers.
Thank you, Preksha. Now I'll give you 8 minutes to analyze each other's arguments.
Ma'am, we just need 2 minutes. 8 minutes is too
Yeah, I
long.
mean, Preksha, do you agree? 2 minutes or five, whatever.
Can take 5.
Okay, let's do five then, and then we'll come back to rebuttals. So, we're going to start the rebuttal rounds. In our opposition is Preksha. Preksha, on your self count whenever you're ready.
On the count of three, two, one. The opposition mentioned that tech companies have profit as their only priority. Yes, tech companies aim to make profit just like any other business, but this honestly does not mean that they automatically become unethical or incapable of bringing some positive change to the community. We cannot just assume that. mm, we cannot just assume this. In fact, many companies are already taking voluntary steps to improve these practices. Um, and promote ethical sourcing, because this also has an effect on their reputation. They have pressure from investors, and also consumer demand requires it. Therefore, they automatically have to ensure that they don't that they improve labor practices, and holding them criminally liable for every chain issue can assume bad faith on by default, and which can ignore the actual progress made. So instead of punishing all companies as they only chase profit, we should support frameworks that actually align profit with responsibility. And the second, the opposition mentioned that fair supply chain falls apart. This argument wrongly assumes that only legal liability can maintain fairness.
I
In
think it's
reality,
fine.
market forces, consumer pressure have already caused and driven significant improvements in supply chains, and companies should act ethically, but turning moral pressure into legal liability ignores the complexity of uh, global trade. Ethics should guide business behavior, but accountability should be shared with governments and international bodies.
Okay, works.
Okay.
Chair,
Just a minute.
yeah.
So basically there are just 8 minutes left. So if the meeting expires, I'll send a new link. Veda, hello.
Yeah.
We are already in the middle of the rebuttal. Hello. Oh, she's left.
Okay, works.
Okay.
Uh, I'll start
So,
on my self count of
yeah.
3, 2, 1. Ma'am, a few points were raised that I'll respond to briefly. First, the claim that holding tech companies accountable would place an unrealistic burden on them. Ma'am, the EU itself passed a due diligence directive in 2024 that makes human rights monitoring in supply chains mandatory for large firms. And companies like Patagonia, Nestle, and even Unilever have already taken steps in this direction without collapse. So this burden is not unrealistic. It is just inconvenient for those who don't want to be responsible. Second, it was said that tech companies don't have direct control and that their chains are too spread out. Ma'am, they choose those supply chains. They negotiate the prices, set the timelines, and manage the contracts. So if they can control every other part of the chain, surely they can control whether child labor or unsafe working conditions are a part of it. This isn't about ownership. This is about influence. Third, the idea that the opposition mentioned that it's not possible to check everything in such a huge network. Ma'am, we are not asking for perfection. We are asking for action when problems are itself visible. In 2016, Amnesty International published a report about children mining cobalt in Congo for tech companies, and yet many of those companies kept sourcing from the same areas without pause. So clearly, it is not about whether they can check; it's about whether they care to. Lastly, the opposition said that this could lead to job losses or hinder business development. Ma'am, what kind of development are we defending if it relies on unpaid, abused, or exploited workers? True development doesn't come from cutting corners. It comes from building systems that are fair for everyone in the chain, and holding those at the top accountable is a step in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranath. Okay, so there are 5 minutes left, so I will be sending a new link. But until then, I'll just exit this meeting and then I'll send a new link. Then please join in as well.
Chair, we could just like what ask POIs right now, as 5 minutes are a lot of time.
Okay,
Is it okay?
that's also fine. What did you suggest? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We could just have one question and answer round, and in the new link, you could just provide us the feedback.
Does that work for you, Preksha?
Uh, can we wrap it up quickly? I have another class.
Okay. So 5 minutes are left. Do you want me to give the judgment?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Pranath, then I'll probably give the judgment because Preksha doesn't
Yeah,
have.
works.
Okay. So basically, I'll start with the opening statements first. I'll start with Pranath, the proposition. Good research. You presented a lot of case studies and excellent persuasion skills. I noticed a point and evidence structure in your speech, which was nice. And you spoke with clarity. The opposition, the points were very good. The research, you could have added more points maybe there. The case studies were also nice. And the persuasiveness was also there. You did pause a little bit, but I think that's completely okay. In the rebuttals, we'll start with the opposition. You were very persuasive. I think you did much better in your rebuttals, and you addressed the right point in the first statement, which I really liked. And the research was very good as well. The proposition, you addressed 2 points of the opposition in your speech. The research was there, and the persuasiveness was also there. Based on that result, Pranad wins this debate, and my only tip will be to the opposition will probably be add more research. I think you were good at persuading people, but you could add more research. Yes, Pranath, go ahead.
I already mentioned 4 to 5 points about the opposition, not two, in
Yeah,
my
but like two with
rebuttal speech.
evidence is what I'm
Oh, okay, works. Yeah,
evidence.
okay, works.
That's why. So, Pranath, do you want to give any feedback?
No, that's good. I mean, yeah, just as the chair said, just include a more research in your speech, like the facts that go against me or the blunders which my side as the proposition has done regarding the agenda. And yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Preksha, do you have anything to say or give advice?
Feedback as such.
Sorry?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining in.